As a visitor from Baltimore, I resided in Paris during the spring and early summer of 1840. There, I became acquainted with Monsieur C. Auguste Dupin. After knitting together an odd but illuminating friendship, my initial misgivings regarding his eccentricities faded. Little did I suspect that such a one as this would prove to be, among other things, a criminal mastermind. The inner workings of the analytical mind in themselves require analysis. A common person can appreciate such processes only in their results. These features are to the gifted, when abundantly possessed, a source of the liveliest enjoyment. I imagine that such enjoyment was the only diversion for one as discerning but also so dispossessed as Auguste Dupin. Our first meeting was at an obscure library in the Rue Morgue, where the accident of our common search of a larger understanding of the universe brought us into closer communion.
Excuse me? May I see what you're browsing through there?
This Thoreau?
Ah, it is as I thought. You're American. If I may?
Yes?
Let me show you something. I couldn't help but notice that you've been scanning books on transcendental philosophy. Thoreau's imagination can be stimulating, but are you familiar with this author?
Edgar Allan Poe?
He is also American. His works illustrate the operations of the bi-part soul.
He's a transcendentalist as well?
Quite the contrary. His stories exhibit a fascinating connection to cosmology. Does that appeal to you?
I like to think that I'm open-minded.
Splendid. Shh.
Sorry. I'm interested in learning more. Perhaps we can take our discussion to the cafe around the corner. La Coupe?
Let me check these books out.
And I these. Under any other circumstances, I would have considered my invitation to Dupin unspeakably shocking. But something about the man set me at ease. I felt I was experiencing an immediate affinity with a comrade, rather than exploring the possibility of a romantic entanglement. It was on our walk to the La Coupe that he shared the story of his family's misfortunes. I found myself engrossed in a discourse that would have seemed tedious from any other stranger. I was astonished at the vast extent of Dupin's reading, and above all, I felt my soul enkindled within me by the wild fervor and vivid freshness of his imagination. Seeking in Paris the objects I then sought, I felt assured that the company of such a man would be a treasure to me beyond any price. Then, it was Dupin's turn to offer an unorthodox invitation.
Taking what you said about being open-minded as my cue, I would like to propose an arrangement that may seem a trifle unconventional.
Would you?
We should live together during your stay in the city.
So it's true what they say about how things are done in Paris.
I've come upon a time-eaten and grotesque mansion in a retired and desolate portion of the Faubourg Saint-Germain. Why not join me? Its furnishings are in a style which suit the rather fantastic gloom of our common temper.
Well, a mansion?
Long deserted through superstitions into which we shall not inquire.
Only on condition that you permit me to undertake the expense of renting.
I knew you'd concur. We'll shut up all the messy shutters, light a few strongly perfumed tapers, and busy our souls in dreams, reading, writing, or conversing until we're warned by the clock of the advent of the true darkness. He is a very little fellow, that's true, and would be more suitable for boulevard comedy in that regard.
No doubt. Dupin. This is beyond my comprehension. I'll not hesitate to say that I'm amazed and can scarcely credit my senses. How is it possible that you should know exactly what I was thinking of?
Of the actor Chantilly.
I...
Why do you pause? You were merely contemplating how Chantilly's diminutive figure is not fitted to the tragedy on the level of Xerxes.
This was precisely what had just formed the subject of my reflections. How could you know?
It was when we passed the Royal Opera House. That's when the notion of Chantilly playing the role of Xerxes at the Royal Opera prompted your thought process on the matter. It was only at this moment that you ordered your precise reasoning on the subject.
And what method enabled you to fathom my soul in this matter?
Here we are. Luck. We're in luck. There's an open table for two at this time at night. Let's not defy the blessing of good fortune and grab it quickly.
Here's our waiter.
Good evening, Maurice. I believe I'll indulge in a fig tart with my chocolate tonight. Provided I have an obliging patron?
An obliging patron? Oh, of course. I'll pick up the tab. Just bring me a hot tea and honey.
It was the fruit seller.
Fruit seller?
Yes, the fruit seller. It was he who ultimately prompted your rumination on Chantilly's small stature.
But I know of no fruit seller whomsoever.
The man who ran up against you as we entered the street, about 5 minutes ago.
That was a fruit seller?
He was carrying a basket of apples on his head.
You astonish me. Now I remember. There was indeed a man carrying a large basket of apples on his head. He nearly bumped me to the ground as we passed from the Rue Cleberg into the thoroughfare. But what that mishap has to do with the actor Chantilly, I couldn't possibly fathom.
I will explain so that you may comprehend all clearly.
Please do.
We will first retrace the course of your meditations from the library to the unfortunate rendezvous with the fruit seller in question, and on to my confirmation of the ultimate result of your clever thought process. The events culminated from a chain of influences that included Epicurus, La Presse, horses, fruit seller, Orion, Adams, and Chantilly.
But these are only unconnected notions. A chain, you say?
It was dark when we departed the library. The stars had already begun to appear. I observed a slight change in your demeanor as we passed the Royal Opera, but continued with the story of my family. We were talking about horses as we entered the Rue Cleberg.
About how the horses in Paris seem smaller to me than those in Baltimore.
As we crossed into the street, a fruit seller, brushing quickly past us, thrust you on a pile of paving stones connected at the spot where the causeway is undergoing repair.
I nearly took quite a spill.
You stepped upon one of the loose fragments and slipped sideways. I was surprised at how vexed and sulky you appeared. You leveled a profanity, turned to look at the pile, and then proceeded in silence. Don't feel uneasy about this minute scrutiny. Observations have become a species of necessity of me of late.
So it seems.
You kept your eyes upon the ground, glancing with a petulant expression at the holes and ruts in the pavement.
You judged me petulant?
It was after about 20 steps that your countenance brightened up, and perceiving your lips move, I could quite make out that you murmured the word stones.
I don't recall that.
It was unconscious. I knew that you could not think of stones this way without thinking of how stones initially factored in Epicurus' theory on atoms.
Such a connection seemed inevitable to you, did it?
I was supported in this conclusion by my recollection of the book on Epicurus at the library table where you were sitting.
I was reading that because I was interested in...
You were interested in the subject of the book. That being conclusions drawn by noble Greek philosophers regarding nebular cosmology. Which is why, when you cast your eyes upward towards Orion at that very moment, I was assured I had correctly followed your reflections and assimilations.
I may have admired the stars at that moment, and I admit that there may have been a passing connection between that and my cursory study of Epicurus. Of course, anyone would subconsciously connect atoms with Epicurus, he having coined that very word. But it would have been merely an enhancement to my thinking, not a preoccupation. And in no way does any of this connect to the actor Chantilly.
But also at the library, I observed, next to your book on Epicurus, a copy of the newspaper La Presse. it was laid open to a theater review of the very production Xerxes in which Chantilly appeared.
As a patron of the arts, I read all the theater reviews in La Presse whenever the opportunity presents itself.
That notice was a bitter tirade about Chantilly, and how one better suited to boulevard comedy shouldn't be allowed to appear in such a respected tragedy, let alone play the main role. I read the same article myself this morning over breakfast.
But I don't see a connection
Previous to this instant, you had been stooped in your gait. But the instant you stopped and looked upward, I saw you draw yourself up to your full height.
How does my posture serve as proof of anything?
Through observation, I was affirmed by your newly confident posture that through observing the Orion constellation, you drew together a sense of closure from a composition of notions, prompted by your attention to the stars. This resulted in a fleeting connection between your recognition of Orion to your study of Epicurus, which planted the notion of the smallness of atoms. While indirect, your observations about the relative smallness of Parisian horses in comparison to those in America laid further context for the inevitable denouement of your deliberations. An assimilation of all these thoughts caused you to dwell on the diminutive physicality of Chantilly.
Now that you mention it,
Quickly recalling his small stature would have led you to the realization that this deficiency in size, in fact, would have been a detriment for any actor playing a character of such monumental stature as Xerxes. Here come our refreshments.
I am most impressed, awed even. However, while I can't deny the accuracy of your conclusion, I'm compelled to quibble with the legitimacy of your logic.
Logic played only a peripheral role in my understanding of your internal monologue. Such linear considerations as deduction and chronology should indeed be taken into account, but attention must be prioritized for such factors as observation, composition, assimilation, and most importantly, intuition.
Intuition? Doesn't that occur without conscious effort?
It does. But unfortunately, with the rise of technology, we lose this natural connection to the outer world with each passing day. Intuition is the only means available that allows us to extend beyond the bounded self onto the completeness of the outer self.
Sounds complex.
What is complex is often mistaken for what is profound. In arriving at a simple solution, the necessary effort is not to unravel complexity, but to observe what is pertinent within the chaos of complexity. Let's take, for example, this lurid headline in La Presse: Extraordinary Murders in the Rue Morgue. Logic would dictate that the dramatic inclusion in the headline of the word extraordinary suggests some untoward element of the crime.
My thought would be that the word murders, indicating more than one victim, would be the logical corollary to the word extraordinary.
Splendid observation. Now, understanding that both our suppositions, in consort, can create a canvas on which an entire painting can be rendered allows us to engage in a creative endeavor that unleashes the power of analysis.
Shall we begin our brushstrokes by reading the newspaper's full account of the events?
You may prove to be a worthy confederate yet. Let's see what we have. This morning, about 3 a.m., the inhabitants of the Quartier Saint-Roch were aroused from sleep by a succession of terrific shrieks issuing from the 4th story of a house in the Rue Morgue, known to be the sole occupancy of one Madame L'Espagne and her daughter, Mademoiselle Camille L'Espagne.
Sounds horrifying.
After some delay, occasioned by a fruitless attempt to procure admission in the usual manner, the gateway to the residence was broken in with a crowbar. Between 8 or 10 of the neighbors entered, accompanied by 2 police officers.
The police officers must have been on duty, patrolling the quarter.
As logic would dictate. But let's observe the complexities of the situation before we allow ourselves to make assumptions.
Fair enough. Continue.
As the party rushed up the first flight of stairs, voices in angry contention were heard and seemed to proceed from the upper part of the house.
Our observations are that an entry gate was broken into. Police officers were on hand assisted by between 8 to 10 citizens. 2 people on an upper floor were engaged in what can be characterized as an argument.
As the second landing was reached, these sounds had ceased and everything became perfectly quiet.
Was I in error by characterizing the voices in angry contention as an argument?
Patience is what's required. The story continues. The apartment was in the wildest disorder. The furniture was broken and thrown about in all directions. The bed frame had been lifted and thrown into the middle of the floor, leaving the headboard in what appears to have been the bed's original position.
Observation. Damage to heavy objects. Room in disarray.
Listen to this. On a chair lay a razor, besmeared with blood. Upon the fireplace's hearth there were 3 long and thick tresses of gray hair, also dabbled in blood, seeming to have been pulled out by the roots. Upon the floor were found 4 Napoleon busts, a topaz earring, 3 large silver spoons, and 2 bags containing nearly 4,000 francs in gold.
2 bags of gold? Left at the scene, were they? This was obviously not a robbery.
Avoid jumping to conclusions.
Wouldn't both logic and instinct dictate such a conclusion?
Perhaps. I continue. The drawers of a bureau, which stood in one corner, were open and had been apparently rifled through, although many articles still remained in them.
As of now, we have little more than a disheveled room, a razor and some hair remnants. Hardly worthy of the story's melodramatic headline.
Of Madame l'Espagne, no traces were seen. An unusual quantity of soot being observed in the fireplace, a search was made in the chimney. Our narrative now arrives at its first gruesome discovery. From the chimney flue, the corpse of the daughter, head downward, was dragged into the room. It appears the body was forced up the narrow aperture.
How terrifying.
Upon examining the body, many lacerations were perceived, no doubt occasioned by the violence in which it had been thrust up and disengaged.
This is most unsettling.
Have a sip of your tea. I fear that the report will become ghastlier before we reach our denouement. Upon the face were many severe scratches, and upon the throat, dark bruises and deep indentation of fingernails, as if the deceased had been throttled to death. Well, scratches, bruises, and deep indentations of fingernails, that supplies us with some vivid imagery, no? After a thorough investigation of every portion of the house, without further discovery, the party made its way into a small, paved yard in the rear of the building, where lay the corpse of the old lady, with her throat so entirely cut that upon an attempt to raise her body, the head fell off.
Oh!
The body, as well as the head, was fearfully mutilated. The former so much so as scarcely to retain any semblance of humanity.
Stop! Please! Let me catch my breath.
Only this remains. To the reason for this horrible mystery, there is not, as yet, the slightest clue. I may just make a trip up to the police station. I have on occasion assisted the police in investigations.
You? With their full approval?
These previous ventures were met with degrees of aloofness, varying from begrudging condescension to blunt dismissal. This case, however, is just complicated enough where I think that they would tolerate my suppositions to whatever advantage they may obtain. I'll see if I can gain entry into the upper chamber. You pay a visit to the neighbors of the Rue Morgue and gather as much information so as to fill in the blanks left by the newspaper's account.
So, Dupin departed for the police station and I headed for the Rue Morgue. Most of what I was able to gather from the neighbors simply supported the newspaper's account. Some additional background included that the old woman and her daughter were of comfortable means and on good terms. The building had once been an apartment complex, but the lady of the house grew weary of the indignities of being a landlord. She summarily evicted the tenants that were still occupying the first 3 floors, and the 2 women became sole residents. Having lost their rental income, Madame L'Espanaye augmented their wealth by offering sessions as a fortune teller. None of those in the neighborhood knew of any of Madame's clients to be suspicious characters. The only confusion in the accounts had to do with the voices and angry contention. All those who testified seemed to agree that one of the voices was gruff in nature, while the other was shrill. While no one could make out what they were arguing about, all of them seemed certain that one of the voices was a Frenchman. There was also unanimity among those who heard the argument that the other voice was not French. However, there were contradictions regarding the precise language of this other voice of contention. 2 witnesses said that the shrill voice was that of an Italian. Another said that it was Spanish. Others weren't sure but ventured guesses. German, English, and even Bulgarian. A young couple told me that the voices seemed quick and unequal. They all agreed that it was the Frenchman who spoke with a gruff voice. Each article of this information I relayed to Dupin when we met up at the mansion later that night.
The information yielded from your venture is meager, but perhaps useful.
I can't fathom what to make of the confusion surrounding the nationality of the foreigner. What did you learn from the police?
Nothing that I would trust. Of course, they're completely baffled. The lead investigator erred continually by the very intensity of his investigation. He impaired his vision by holding the object too close. He might see, perhaps, 1 or 2 insignificant points with unusual clarity, but in doing so he necessarily lost sight of the matter as a whole. Truth lies in the valleys where we seek her, not upon the mountaintops where she resides. For me, those valleys were discovered at the scene of the crime.
I take it that you were given access to the chamber.
I was.
And what did you find in those valleys, as you call them?
Something significant amid the complexities, perhaps. But tell me, a badly disheveled room on a 4th floor, the door locked from within, a contentious argument, a group of neighbors ascending the stairs towards a bloody outcome. What stands out in the complexities of all this?
Aside from the atrocity of it all? Any number of things, if we knew what to look for. There are simply too many choices. I tend to agree with the police. The whole thing seems quite unsolvable.
This mystery is considered unsolvable for the very reasons that it should be regarded as easily solved, if one considers the outer character of its features.
Isn't it precisely the outward features of the mystery that have the police so confounded?
The police are confounded not by the murder itself, but by the seeming absence of a motive. They're preoccupied by what you characterize as the atrocity of it all. They are puzzled, too, by the seeming impossibility of reconciling the voices heard in the aftermath.
In trying to determine the nationality of the potential perpetrators.
Add to this a corpse with the head downward, thrust up in the chimney, and the frightful mutilation of the body of the old lady in an outdoor location. These considerations have paralyzed those given the responsibility of investigation.
And to be quite honest, me as well.
They and you have fallen into the gross but common error of compounding the unusual with the mysterious. But it is by these deviations from the ordinary that reason feels its way through instinct in search for the truth. In investigations such as these, it should not be asked what may have occurred, but what may have occurred that has never occurred before. In fact, the facility with which I've arrived at the solution of this mystery is the direct ratio of its apparent insolubility in the eyes of the police.
Solution?
I am now waiting for a person to walk through those doors who, although perhaps not the perpetrator of these butcheries, must have been in some measure implicated in their perpetration.
Coming here? You're not serious.
How else will we get to the bottom of this mystery?
Aren't you concerned for our safety?
Of the worst portion of the crimes committed, it's highly probable that our invited guest is innocent.
That's cold comfort.
I hope that I'm right in this supposition, for upon it I build my expectation of understanding the entire riddle. However, it will be necessary to detain him when he appears. Here are pistols, and we both know how to use them when the occasion demand their use.
You attribute to me skills unearned.
You know how to point the weapon. That effort alone should suffice.
I admire your generous perspective.
Regarding the voices of contention, did you observe anything peculiar about the testimony you gathered?
All the witnesses were inclined to believe that the gruff voice belonged to a Frenchman. But there was some disagreement with regard to the shrill voice. It truly might have been the voice of an Asian or of an African.
I will now call your attention to 2 points. One regarding the shrill voice and the other addressing the means of escape. First, of the shrill voice, no precise words were distinguishable by any witness.
So, we have no way of knowing what they were arguing about.
Secondly, of the means of escape, Madame and Camille L'Espagne were not murdered by ghosts. Those involved were material and, therefore, escaped materially.
Then how?
Let us examine, each by each, the possible means of escape. As the party ascended the stairs, it is clear that the assassins were heard from the room where the daughter was found in the chimney. Following their investigation, the police assured me that there were no secret passageways in the room.
And you were convinced?
Not at all. This is why I undertook an examination of my own. There were, in fact, no secret passageways.
Eliminating one possibility.
Let us turn to the chimney. Common sense eliminates the possibility that the arguing parties, after they murdered the daughter, pulled the body up the chimney as they departed. There was no way for 2 individuals to pass through the same chimney flue that would have caused Camille L'Espagne to get stuck in the passage.
From where, other than through the door or up the fireplace, was escape possible?
Close your eyes. In your mind, scan the surroundings.
The door. Locked. The fireplace. Too narrow and thoroughly obstructed. The walls and floor. Impassable.
What do your instincts reveal?
There is one obvious means, but it's not possible.
Yes?
The windows.
You believe the culprits might have flown in and flown away?
Of course not. Then a ladder. 2 men could easily transport and put a ladder against the building.
Even if they could locate a ladder in Paris that could extend all the way to the 4th floor of this building, there would need to be a compelling reason for them to enter and exit by such conspicuous means. A ladder didn't play a role in either the entry or escape.
Then by what means of egress did they employ?
Oh, they most definitely entered and escaped through the window on the 4th floor.
Via some invisible staircase, no doubt.
Keeping that fanciful proposition in absentia, consider this. I decided to look out the window to investigate some possible mode of entry and descent.
Didn't the police do the same?
If they did, they lacked the requisite imagination to see the possibilities of what I discovered.
And what intelligence did your imagination supply?
There is a lightning rod that runs about 5.5 feet away from the rear window of the 4th floor. From this rod, it would have been impossible for anyone to reach the window itself, say nothing of entering it. I observed, however, that the shutter of the 4th-story windows are in the form of an ordinary door, except that the lower half is latticed, thus affording an excellent hold for hands.
You think the culprits could have climbed the lightning rod, made a leap of 5.5 feet, and then grabbed the bottom of the window shutter? Would it be possible for a man to leap such a distance and then pull himself through the window?
Consider the very unusual degree of strength and agility that would have been necessary for such a feat.
You seem to have arrived at a solution that satisfies your theory, but defies the laws of gravity.
Your error lies in the fact that you are considering what may have occurred instead of what may have occurred that has never occurred before. To answer this second question, one must discover how such a physical feat could have been accomplished.
Let me think. Are we in circus season yet?
Splendid.
It may have not been possible for 2 ordinary men to find passage from the end of the lightning rod, but 2 trained acrobats would have spent their entire life preparing for such a moment.
A proposition that could only be arrived at by viewing the entire landscape and through the reliance of your instinct.
Learning that a large amount of gold was on the 4th floor, the 2 acrobats devised a way to enter and exit through the 4th floor window without being detected.
Very insightful and nimble analysis. Well done.
You have taught me well, Dupin.
Unfortunately, there are 2 flaws in your theory.
If the motive was to steal the gold, then why were the bags discovered in the aftermath?
Correct.
But the argument? Maybe one of the perpetrators had second thoughts. As a result, the 2 argued and then departed without the gold.
It would have only taken one of them to throw the bags out the window, even if one of them objected.
A myriad of explanations would explain why they would have left the gold.
That's true, and I would happily entertain them all, but for the second flaw in your theory.
Which is?
That we are indeed in the midst of the circus season, and all the professional acrobats are scattered throughout France, preparing for their return to Paris the end of the season.
And there are no amateurs on Earth who could accomplish such an entry into the building.
Which leads us to what alternative?
We return to the complexity of our landscape.
That peculiar voice, that unusual agility, and the startling absence of a motive in a murder so singularly atrocious as this. Let us glance at the butchery itself. Here is a woman strangled to death by manual strength and then thrust up a chimney, head downward. Another whose head is almost completely severed.
It's all so inhuman.
There is something altogether irreconcilable between the facts and our common notion of human action, even if we suppose the culprits are among the most insane and depraved of men.
Oh dear.
What is it?
I confess to a vague and half-formed conception of your meaning, Dupin. I sense that I'm on the verge of comprehension without the power to comprehend absolutely.
And what is it that you lack?
I lack the instinct to see the single item within the complexity that serves as the key that will unlock the truth.
Allow me to submit this for your consideration.
What is that?
The hair of the killer, a clump of which I now hold in my hand. This is what I found undetected by the police in the chamber of Madame L'Espagne's home at the Rue Morgue amid the complexity of all the disorder.
How could such clear evidence escape the notion of the police?
Because they were searching for what may have happened, but keeping my eyes open for what may have happened that has never happened before. I discovered this little tuft of hair in the very location where Camille was found strangled. Likely, she yanked it out during the struggle and it fell to the floor. Tell me what you make of it.
Dupin, this isn't human hair. It's some kind of tawny fur. No wonder the police dismissed it.
My suspicions prompted me to stop at the library on my way home to check out this book by the recently deceased French naturalist and zoologist, Georges Cuvier. I read it last summer. Read this passage.
The large orangutan of the East Indian Islands is gigantic in stature and possesses prodigious strength and wild ferocity. Additionally, it has a propensity to imitate human behavior. I believe I'm beginning to understand the full horrors of what happened. Of course, no human could have done this, But an animal, such as an orangutan, of the species here mentioned, could have made such an ascent up the lightning rod, swung to and grabbed the shutter from 5.5 feet away, and leapt into the room by the window. This tuft of tawny fur, too, is identical in character with that of the beast Cuvier describes. The shrill voice! This explains why no one could determine the nationality of the language. But the Frenchman...
A Frenchman who is cognizant of the murder. The orangutan may have escaped from him. He may have traced it to the chamber, but under the circumstances, he could never have pursued and recaptured it. Our orangutan's still likely at large.
There's a flaw in your theory, Dupin.
The Frenchman was heard shouting at the orangutan.
Precisely.
You're wondering how he entered and escaped the locked room.
This doesn't negate your theory about the orangutan, but it leaves a significant question unanswered.
Which is why we need to interview the Frenchman. Last night, I left a notice at the office of the Le Monde, a newspaper much favored and read by sailors.
Of course. It would most likely be a sailor in possession of such a creature.
This notice appeared in the morning edition.
Caught. In the Bois de Boulogne, early in the morning of Tuesday, June 24th, a very large, tawny orangutan of the Bornese species. The owner may claim the animal upon identifying it and paying a few charges arising from its capture and keeping. Make claim at number 26, Rue Morgue, Faubourg Saint-Germain. How do you know that the creature hasn't already been captured by the owner and is now in his possession?
I don't know.
And even if it's still at large, knowing the savagery that was committed by the creature, wouldn't he stay away?
It's more likely he'll reason thus. I am innocent. I am poor. My orangutan is of great value. To one in my circumstances, why should I lose it through idle apprehensions of danger? It was found in the Bois de Boulogne, a vast distance from the scene of the butchery. How can it ever be suspected that a brute beast should have done the deed? I will answer the advertisement, get the orangutan, and keep it close until this matter has blown over.
Do you hear that?
Be ready with your pistol, but don't show it until I aim my own. Come in.
Evening.
I suppose you've called about the orangutan.
Aye.
Come in. Sit down, my friend. I see by your attire that you're a sailor?
First mate on the Pandour. Is he here?
Good heavens, no. We have no means to secure him here. He's at a nearby livery stable. You can get him in the morning. Of course, you're prepared to identify the property?
To be sure I am, sir.
I shall be sorry to part with him.
I don't mean that you should be at all this trouble for nothing, sir. I'm very willing to pay a reward for the finding of the animal. That is to say, anything in reason.
That's very generous. Why don't we say this? Rather than a cash reward, why don't you give me all the information in your power about these murders in the Rue Morgue?
There's no need to draw pistols on me.
Then you have no need for that cudgel in your right hand. Please, drop it to the floor. We intend you no injury.
What do you want?
Things now stand thus. You have done nothing illegal yourself. You're not even guilty of robbery when you might have robbed with impunity. You have nothing to conceal. On the other hand, you are bound by every principle of honor to confess all you know.
So help me God, I'll tell you all I know about this affair. But I don't expect you to believe one half of what I say. I would be a fool if I did. Still, I'm innocent, and I'll make a clean breast, even if I die for it.
Your thoroughness is all I require. Take your time.
I made a voyage to the Indian archipelago last month and landed with my party in Borneo. That's where I captured the orangutan. After which, I returned to Paris and lodged in my own residence, with the ultimate design to sell the beast as quickly as possible.
How did you manage to keep him contained within an apartment?
I put him in my bedroom and locked the door. He seemed content, sitting on my bed, watching my every move. So I washed and shaved and changed my clothes. He just sat there calmly, so I left the bedroom, locked the door, and slept that night in the common quarters.
You left him alone?
He kept quiet all night, not a stir. When I checked on him the next morning, I found the beast had a razor in his hand with his face fully lathered. It was sitting in front of a looking glass, attempting to shave as I did the night before.
There you stood, face to face with an armed beast.
For some moments, I was at a loss what to do. Then I grabbed my whip. Upon the sight of it, the orangutan sprang at once through the door of my bedroom, razor still in hand, ran down the stairs and out a window into the street. I was able to follow him closely enough so as not to lose sight of him.
Were there witnesses to your chase?
It was early morning. The streets were quite deserted. We went down an alley in the rear of the building off the Rue Morgue. Suddenly, the beast's attention was drawn by a light gleaming from an open window on the top story of the building. It clambered up to the top of the lightning rod, swung and grabbed the open window shutter, and leapt directly into the apartment through the window. Then I heard hideous shrieks from the room. The neighbors were roused, and windows began to light up from candles being set ablaze.
You just stood there?
For only an instant. I clambered up the lightning rod, hoping to corner my ape, but was obstructed from further advancement when I reached the top. The shutter was too far away for me to leap for it. From where I hung on, I leaped back and away on that rod so I could see into the room through the window. What a sight! The animal had seized on the old woman by the hair and was flourishing the razor around her face.
The ape was merely imitating the act of shaving that he had observed hours earlier.
The daughter fainted and lay prostrate on the floor. The screams and struggles of the old lady provoked the orangutan to wrath. With one determined sweep of its arm, it nearly severed her head from her body. The sight of blood inflamed its anger into frenzy. It skipped about the chamber in agitation, throwing down and breaking the furniture as it moved, dragging the bed from the bedstead and throwing it toward the fainted young woman, just missing her. I shouted at the animal through the window, but that only seemed to increase his savagery.
Of course. The argument heard by the party on the staircase was your exclamations of horror through the open window commingled with the fiendish jabberings of the brute.
You being outside the window. That's why the voices seemed quick and unequal.
The girl regained consciousness, and the beast flew upon her and embedded its talons in her throat. It held on till she croaked. I screamed at the beast again, and this time his fury was instantly converted to fear. It almost seemed to have been gripped by remorse.
His rage subsided.
Then it seized first the corpse of the daughter and thrust it up the chimney in the manner of a guilty party hiding the evidence of their crime. Then he lifted the corpse of the old lady and hurled her outside through the window toward me. I slid down the lightning rod to prevent being struck, in free flight much of the way. I could see the ape following me from above, but I didn't wait around. When I reached the bottom, I hurried home undetected.
As to our tale, I have scarcely anything to add. Within days of our interview with the sailor, he caught the creature and later obtained for it a very large sum at the Jardin des Plantes. After which, he returned to Paris and went directly to the police to inform them of all that had occurred. The chief inspector made statements to the press, thanking his staff for their assistance in helping him to solve the case.
Dupin could not altogether conceal his chagrin at the turn of events and seemed satisfied to indulge in a sarcastic barb or two.
Let the inspector find solace in his newfound fame. I'm satisfied with having defeated him in his own castle. Our intrepid inspector is somewhat too cunning to be profound. There is all head and no body in his wisdom. He is therefore left with the anemic task of denying what is and explaining what is not.